Let's see if you're even mine, my father said, sliding a DNA test kit across the Thanksgiving table, past the cranberry sauce, past the gravy boat, straight into my plate. 25 relatives laughed. My brother high-fived him. My mother stared at her wine glass like it held the answers to everything she'd been hiding for 30 years. I didn't cry. I didn't leave. I picked up the kit, looked my father in the eye, and said one word. Okay. 3 weeks later, the results came back. I emailed them to every single person at that table. My mother fainted. My father dropped his fork. Because the test proved I was his only biological child, and the golden boy he'd given everything to wasn't his at all. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. And drop a comment. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it where you are? My name is Caroline Mitchell. I'm 28 years old. I'm a pediatric ICU nurse in a small hospital outside Richmond, Virginia. And this is the story of how my father's cruelest joke became the truth that set me free. Now let me take you back to Thanksgiving, last November, the night everything changed. The Mitchell family. Thanksgiving was never a casual affair. My father, Richard Mitchell, Rick to everyone who feared him and pretended not to, hosted it every year at the house on Briarwood Lane, a 4,000-square-foot colonial he'd built with his own crew back in 2003. That was the thing about Dad. Everything he owned, he made sure you knew he'd earned it. The dining table was a 10-foot slab of reclaimed Virginia oak, purchased from an antique dealer in Stowe, Vermont. 12 chairs, hand-turned spindles. My father sat at the head. My brother Garrett sat to his right, in the chair that had GM carved into the backrest. Dad did that when Garrett was 6, like some kind of coronation. I sat at the far end, near the kitchen door, the seat closest to the serving platters because, well, someone had to refill them. 25 people filled that room. Aunts, uncles, cousins, Garrett's wife, and their 4-year-old son Mason. My father wore his Breitling Navy timer, the one he bought himself when Mitchell & Sons construction cleared its first $1 million year. Garrett had new Cole Haan loafers. My mother, Jolene, wore her cream-colored Talbot's blazer and her Mikimoto pearl bracelet, the one Dad gave her for their 25th anniversary. An anniversary dinner I wasn't invited to. I wore a cardigan I'd had since nursing school. Gray, pilled at the elbows. Here's the thing you'd notice if you looked at the Mitchells gathered around that table. Every single one of them was blonde. Sandy blonde, honey blonde, platinum blonde. And then there was me. Auburn hair, reddish in the light, dark enough to stand out in every family photo like a typo in a legal document. My father had spent 20 years treating that typo like proof, but Thanksgiving this year, Dad brought something to the table that wasn't on the menu. Let me give you 20 years in 60 seconds. When I was 8, I made a Father's Day card. Construction paper, glitter glue, the works. I wrote, "To the best dad in the world," in my very best cursive. He opened it at the breakfast table, read it, and tore it in half, right down the middle. "I'm not your dad," he said. Then he went back to his eggs. I was 8. When I was 14, Dad enrolled Garrett in St. Andrew's Prep. $12,000 a year, blazers and ties, the whole production. I went to Hopewell Public. When Aunt Brenda asked why, Dad said it out loud, right there at Sunday dinner. Why would I invest in something that might not even be mine? I sat 3 feet away. Nobody said a word. When I was 18, I graduated high school, valedictorian, top of my class, 4.3 GPA, a speech I practiced 40 times in front of my bathroom mirror. Dad didn't come. He was at home, setting up a barbecue for 50 people. A party for Garrett, who'd graduated with a 2.4 and a handshake from the football coach. When I was 22, halfway through my nursing program at VCU, Dad cut my tuition without warning. 1 semester left. He called and said, "I've been paying for someone else's kid long enough." I took out $47,000 in federal student loans. I finished. He never asked if I finished. My mother. I should tell you about her role in all this. Once, when I was 19, I found out she'd been sending me $200 a month. Quietly. Through Venmo. Under the memo, groceries. Then Dad found the transfers. He threatened divorce. She stopped. My father didn't hate me. Hate requires acknowledgement. He simply subtracted me. Now let me tell you about Garrett. Garrett Mitchell. 31, 6'2", sandy blonde, jaw like a catalog model. Dad's pride, Dad's proof. The Mitchell heir, capital H. At 16, Garrett got a brand new F-150. Pearl white, lifted suspension, Mitchell and Sons decal on the tailgate like a family crest. I got a bus pass. Dad paid every cent of Garrett's college tuition at Virginia Tech. 4 years. No loans, no questions. When Garrett graduated, middling grades, business degree he barely used, Dad gave him a corner office at Mitchell and Sons and the title of project manager. No interview, no resume, just bloodline. Or what Dad believed was bloodline. Last spring, Garrett bought a house. New construction in the Willowbrook subdivision. 3,200 square feet, open floor plan, quartz countertops. Dad put down the $80,000 deposit. Just wrote a check. I live in a studio apartment 4 blocks from the hospital. 450 square feet. The kitchen counter doubles as my desk. When I come home from a 12-hour ICU shift, I eat standing up because the table barely fits 1 chair. Garrett drives a black Chevy Tahoe. I drive a 2014 Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper from a parking lot in nursing school. It still runs. That's enough. Now here's the thing about Garrett. He's not evil. I want to be fair about that. He didn't grow up thinking he was doing anything wrong. When you're handed everything from birth, you don't question the system. You just assume you deserve it. His favorite line, delivered with that easy golden boy grin, "Don't worry, Cal, you'll always be an honorary Mitchell." Honorary, like a guest pass to my own family. But here's the part that'll make you laugh. Or maybe not. The irony. I'll get to it. You're not ready yet. My mother, Jolene Mitchell, 54. Blonde highlights every 6 weeks at a salon in Short Pump. Lexus RX in champagne gold. A supplementary credit card on Dad's Amex Platinum that she used like oxygen. Jolene was not a cruel woman. That's what made it worse. She never called me a mistake. She never tore up my cards or refused to attend my graduation. She just didn't stop any of it. Every time Dad said something cutting, Mom studied her wine glass, or her napkin, or the pattern on the wallpaper. She perfected the art of looking at nothing while everything happened right in front of her. When I was 16, I asked her directly. We were alone in the kitchen after Thanksgiving. Fitting, isn't it? And I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Mom, am I Dad's daughter?" She didn't blink. She set down the dish towel and she said, "Don't ask questions you don't want answers to." That sentence lived inside me for 12 years. I turned it over and over like a stone in my pocket, wearing it smooth, trying to figure out what it meant. Was she confirming Dad's suspicion? Was she warning me? Was she protecting herself? It took me 12 years to realize the answer was the third one. Mom lived well. The Briarwood house, the Lexus, the Mikimoto bracelet, the country club membership, the annual trip to Hilton Head. All of it depended on one thing, Rick Mitchell staying married to her. And Rick Mitchell would only stay married to her as long as certain questions stayed unasked. One evening, about a month before Thanksgiving, I stopped by the house to pick up a box of old family photos. Mom was on the couch, phone in hand, deleting a text thread. She closed it fast when she saw me. Too fast. I didn't ask who it was. Not then. Thanksgiving dinner, 8:17 p.m. The turkey had been carved. The wine was flowing. A Caymus Cabernet Dad always overpaid for because he liked saying the name. Garrett was telling a story about a job site, something about a concrete pour and a foreman who couldn't handle pressure. Dad laughed with his whole chest. Mom smiled on cue. I was passing the sweet potatoes when Dad stood up. He tapped his knife against his glass. The room quieted. 25 faces turned toward him, and I swear he looked like a man about to give a toast at his own coronation. I got a little gift for Callie this year, he said. He reached under his chair and pulled out a box, white and green, a home DNA testing kit. He held it up so everyone could see, then slid it down the table toward me. It knocked against my water glass. Let's see if you're even mine. The room erupted. Laughter. The loud, relieved kind that comes when people are uncomfortable, but choose the easy side. Uncle Dennis chuckled into his bourbon. Aunt Brenda looked away. Garrett slapped the table. Savage, Dad. Jolene went white. I watched her fingers tighten around the stem of her glass until I thought it would snap. But she didn't say a word. She never did. I picked up the box. The room got quiet again. A different quiet. I looked at my father. His eyes were bright with amusement. He expected tears, I think. Or maybe a door slam. 20 years of data told him I'd crumble. Okay, I said. That's all. Just, okay. I put the kid in my bag. I finished my dinner. I said goodnight to Aunt Brenda. I drove home to my studio apartment, alone, in my dented Civic. And I sat at my kitchen counter and opened the box. It wasn't what I needed. A consumer ancestry kit tests ethnicity, not paternity. But it gave me the idea. That same night, I ordered a paternity test from an AABB-accredited laboratory. Real chain of custody, real results, results that mean something. I needed 2 samples. Mine was easy. A cheek swab, sealed, labeled. Rick's? He'd left something behind. On the chair where I'd been sitting, his monogrammed handkerchief. Linen. Initials RAM in navy thread. He'd used it to dab wine off his chin and tossed it aside without a thought. I sealed it in a plastic bag. Mailed both samples the next morning. Nobody knew. You wanted the truth, Dad. So did I. The group chat lit up before I even got out of my scrubs the next morning. The Mitchell family group, 42 members, created by Dad 5 years ago, primarily used for holiday logistics and Garrett's construction updates that nobody asked for. That morning, it had a new purpose. Dad had posted a photo. It was me, from the night before, holding the DNA kit at the table. I don't know who took it. Someone's phone, angled from across the room. My face was half turned, mouth slightly open. I looked stunned. Vulnerable. His caption, "Let's see if the mailman left more than just letters." Garrett replied first. 3 laughing emojis. Then, "DNA, don't lie, Dad." Uncle Pete. "Oh man, Rick." Cousin Tara. A single. Which I guess counts as dissent in the Mitchell family. Nobody said, "That was cruel." Nobody said, "Rick, she's your daughter." Nobody said anything at all that resembled defense. 42 people. 42 witnesses to a public joke about my parentage. And the only response was laughter or silence. I read it all at 2:47 a.m., sitting in the break room of the pediatric ICU, fluorescent light buzzing overhead. I'd just come off a code. A 3-year-old with RSV, touch and go for 40 minutes before we stabilized her. My hands still smelled like nitrile gloves. And there it was, on my phone, between a notification about my student loan payment and a weather alert. I screenshotted every message, every emoji, every silence. Dana Reeves, my coworker, my closest friend, the only person at that hospital who knew about my family. She saw my face when I put the phone down. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just looked at me and said, "Get the facts, Callie. Then let the facts do the talking." I locked my phone. I went back to my patient. The lab had my samples. The clock was ticking. 3 weeks before Christmas, my phone rang. Dad. No greeting. No warmth. Just, "Christmas is for family. You know where you stand." He hung up before I could respond. 16 seconds. I know because I checked the call log afterward, staring at it like the number might explain something the words didn't. Garrett texted an hour later. Classic Garrett, performing kindness while enforcing the verdict. "No hard feelings, Cal. It's Dad's house. His rules. Maybe next year things will be different." Then came Mom. Her message wasn't comfort. It wasn't an apology. It was, "Please don't make this worse." 3 messages from 3 Mitchells. Not one of them said, "This is wrong." Not one said, "I'm sorry." The only thing they agreed on was that my absence would make everyone's holiday more comfortable. So I spent Christmas Eve alone. I bought a small Douglas fir from the lot on Patterson Avenue. 4 feet tall, $60 I probably shouldn't have spent. I propped it on my kitchen counter, next to my laptop and a stack of patient charts. I made mac and cheese from a box. I poured 1 glass of wine, a $7 Merlot, not Camus. And I sat in my 1 chair, and I ate. Outside, Richmond was cold and clear. Through the window, I could see the apartment building across the street, their windows glowing with colored lights and the shapes of people moving behind curtains. At 11:43 p.m., I opened my email. There it was. Subject line, "Your DNA test results are ready. Action required." From the lab, dated that afternoon. My thumb hovered over it. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. I closed the email. Not yet. I finished my wine. I turned off the lights. I went to bed. The results would still be there in the morning, and so would I. January 6th. The email arrived at 9:14 a.m. from Richard A. Mitchell to Mitchell Family. Distribution list. CC, Caroline Mitchell. Subject, Estate Planning Update. Formal reading. January 18th. The body was short. Dad wrote the way he built houses. Blunt, load-bearing, no ornamentation. I've been working with my attorney Howard Pratt to finalize my estate plan. After careful consideration, I've decided that Mitchell assets, property, business shares, and financial holdings should pass exclusively to my biological children. A formal reading will take place January 18th at Howard Pratt's office, 10 a.m. Attendance is expected. Signature block, Richard A. Mitchell, Mitchell & Sons Construction, LLC, established 1998. Garrett replied, all within 4 minutes. Thanks, Dad, the right call. Nobody else replied, but I know they all read it. 42 people, 42 silences. He'd CC'd me, not BCC'd, CC'd. He wanted me to see it. He wanted me to know that this wasn't just a dinner table insult or a group chat joke anymore. It was being made legal, official, permanent. Biological children. 2 words that were supposed to be my eviction notice. I read the email 3 times. Then I read it a 4th time, slower, and something clicked. A door I hadn't known was there swung open in my mind. Biological children. If I was Rick's biological child, and a lab somewhere in Maryland was about to tell me whether I was, then that language didn't exclude me. It protected me. And if I was his biological child, and the will only covered biological children, then the real question wasn't about me at all. It was about Garrett. I closed my laptop. I went to work. I intubated a 6-year-old with pneumonia, and I didn't think about the email again until my shift ended 14 hours later. But it sat there, waiting, like everything else. January 9th. I went to Garrett's house to pick up a box of old family photos Mom said she'd left in his garage. Garrett wasn't home. His wife, Stacy, let me in. Polite but distant, the way you'd treat a distant relative at a funeral. She pointed me toward the garage and went back to the kitchen. Mason was in the living room, 4 years old. Blonde curls, Garrett's grin, a dinosaur in each hand. He looked up when I walked past and said, with the casual brutality only a child can deliver, "Daddy says you're not real family. You don't belong here." He said it the way he might say the sky is blue. No malice, just information he'd absorbed the way children absorb everything, from the adults who shape their world. I stopped walking. It wasn't the words. I'd heard worse from his grandfather. It was the realization that I was watching it start over. A new generation, learning the same lie, repeating it with the same easy confidence. Mason would grow up believing his aunt was an outsider, just like Garrett had, and his children after him. I knelt down. Sweetie, family isn't about what people say. It's about what's true. Mason blinked at me, then went back to his dinosaurs. He'd already forgotten it. I hadn't. I took the box of photos, thanked Stacy, and sat in my Civic for 10 minutes with the engine off. The heater ticked as it cooled. My breath fogged the windshield. Then I opened my phone. I opened my email. I tapped on the subject line I'd been avoiding since Christmas. Probability of paternity, 99.9998%. Richard A. Mitchell is the biological father of Caroline R. Mitchell. I read it twice, 3 times. 4. And I thought about a question I want to ask you. Have you ever been in a moment where the truth could destroy everything, but you needed to know anyway? Where not knowing was worse than any fallout? Because that's where I was, sitting in a dented Civic in my brother's driveway, hands shaking, the heater dead, the screen glowing in my lap. I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. I closed the email, I put the car in reverse, and I drove to work. But something had changed. The stone I'd carried in my pocket for 12 years. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. I finally understood what it meant. And it wasn't about me. It was never about me. I sat with the results for 3 days, not because I doubted them. The lab was AABB accredited, the gold standard for paternity testing in the United States, chain of custody documented, results notarized, 99.9998%. In science, that's as close to certainty as you get without witnessing the moment of conception. Number 1. I sat with them because of what they meant. I was Rick Mitchell's daughter, his biological daughter. The child he'd called a mistake for 20 years, the one he'd starved of tuition and presence and basic decency. I was his. I had always been his, which meant the affair my mother had, the one Dad had been punishing me for since I was 8, didn't produce me. It produced someone else. I thought about Mom's face at the Thanksgiving table when Dad slid that kit toward me, the way she went white, the way her fingers strangled the wine glass. She wasn't embarrassed for me. She was terrified for herself. Because she knew, she'd always known, that if anyone in that family actually took a DNA test, the lie wouldn't hold. Not her lie about me. Her lie about Garrett. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. She wasn't protecting me from a painful truth. She was protecting Garrett from a devastating one, and she was protecting herself from the only consequence she truly feared. Rick finding out that his golden boy, his heir, his proudly carved chair firstborn son, carried another man's DNA. I thought about calling her. I picked up the phone twice. Both times I put it down. What would I say? Mom, I know? She'd deny it. She'd cry. She'd beg me not to tell. And I would be right back where I'd always been, holding someone else's secret, swallowing someone else's shame, keeping the peace at my own expense. Not this time. I called a lawyer instead. Margaret Foley's office was on Main Street in Mechanicsville, a narrow brick building between a barbershop and a CPA firm. 2nd floor, no elevator. Her desk was buried under case files and a half-eaten granola bar, and the bookshelves behind her sagged with Virginia estate law volumes thick enough to stop a bullet. I found her the way most people find lawyers these days. Google. Estate attorney, Richmond, Virginia. She was the 3rd result. The reviews said she was thorough, fair, and wouldn't waste your time. What I didn't know, walking in, was that Margaret Foley had gone to James Madison University with my mother, class of 1991. They'd lost touch decades ago. Margaret mentioned it offhand when I gave my last name. Mitchell? Any relation to Jolene Hargrove? And then moved on without pressing. Professional. I liked that. I showed her the DNA results. I showed her the email Dad sent about the will. Assets to biological children only. I showed her the screenshots from the family group chat. She read everything twice, drank her coffee black, and didn't speak until she was done. The language is clear, she said. If his will states that assets pass to biological children, and you can prove you're his biological child, you have a legal claim. A strong one. And if someone else in the family isn't his biological child? She set down her coffee. Then, under the exact language your father chose, that person would have no claim at all. Silence. You'd need more than a home test for court, she continued. But here's the thing. You may not need court. Once your father sees these results, he's going to demand a retest. And when he does, he'll test everyone. That's how men like him operate. They don't stop digging until the ground swallows them. I nodded. You realize this will blow up your entire family, she said. I looked at her across that cluttered desk, the winter light coming through the blinds in pale stripes, and I said, it was never whole to begin with. January 14th, 4 days before the reading. Dad called. Not to reconcile, not to reconsider. To remind me of my place. The reading's on Saturday. I invited you because I want you to hear it from Howard, in person, that you're not getting a dime. Don't come in there crying. Don't come in there begging. And don't embarrass this family any more than you already have. I held the phone away from my ear and watched the seconds tick on the screen. He talked for 2 minutes and 11 seconds. I said 4 words. I'll be there, Dad. He hung up first. He always did. Garrett's text came 20 minutes later. Cal, just accept it. Dad's not going to change. Take the L gracefully. Take the L. Like my entire existence was a scoreboard. Then Mom. Her call came at 9 p.m., her voice low and shaky the way it gets after her second glass of Pinot Grigio. Caroline, please, just don't come. It'll be easier for everyone. Easier for everyone. The Mitchell family motto. I didn't respond to any of them. I put my phone on the charger, poured a glass of water, and stood at my apartment window looking out at the dark parking lot below. My Civic under the streetlight, the frost on the windshield. I was on break between shifts. In 6 hours, I'd be back in the ICU checking ventilator settings on a child who weighed less than my winter coat. I'd be calm, precise, necessary. I'd make decisions that mattered, measured in oxygen levels and heart rates and milligrams. And then in 4 days, I'd walk into a room full of people who'd spent my whole life telling me I didn't matter, and I'd let a piece of paper say what I never could. Dana was right. Let the facts do the talking. January 15th. 3 days out. I met Margaret at her office after my shift. She had the notarized copies ready. 3 sets of the DNA results, each in a sealed envelope, each bearing the lab's certification stamp and her notary seal. Clean. Official. The kind of paperwork that doesn't need a raised voice to make its point. I also pulled the draft will your father emailed, she said, adjusting her reading glasses. He CC'd you on it, which means it's not privileged. And there's something you should know. She turned her laptop toward me. This will hasn't been executed. No signatures, no witnesses. Under Virginia law, it's a statement of intent. Nothing more. Which means his previous will, the one filed 3 years ago, is still the operative document. What does the old will say? Standard language. Assets divided equally among my children. No biological qualifier, no DNA requirement. I leaned back. So, even if he tries to sign the new one, if he signs it, and it holds up to challenge, it says biological children only, and we both know what that means for you. She paused. Either way, Caroline, you're protected. The old will includes you. The new will, if he's foolish enough to sign it, includes only you. She let that sit. I drafted an email that night. Recipients. Every address in the Mitchell family distribution list. Attached. The DNA results. Subject line left blank for now. I saved it in my drafts folder and closed my laptop. Plan B. Just in case. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went shopping. Not at a thrift store, not at Target. I drove to a consignment boutique in Carytown and bought a navy blazer, tailored trousers, and a pair of leather Oxford shoes. $140 total, more than I usually spent on clothes in 3 months. Dana helped me practice that evening. Not what to say, what not to say. You don't owe them an explanation, she told me over reheated hospital cafeteria soup. You walk in, you sit down, you wait for the right moment, and you put the envelope on the table. That's it. Let the paper talk. I nodded. For the first time in 20 years, I wasn't walking into a Mitchell family event hoping to survive it. I was walking in prepared. January 17th, the night before. I couldn't sleep. Not from fear. Not exactly. It was something closer to vertigo. That feeling when you're standing at the edge of a high place and your body knows before your brain does that everything on the other side will be different. I sat on my bed with a shoebox of old photos. Most of them were from before Dad decided I wasn't his. There was one I kept coming back to. Me at 5 years old, sitting on his lap in the backyard. Both of us laughing. His arms around me, my head tipped back. The sun behind us. That was the last time he held me. I was 5. I don't remember what was funny. I just remember feeling safe. I stared at that photo for a long time. Tomorrow, I would walk into a room and end my family as it existed, not destroy it. It was already destroyed, had been for 20 years. We just hadn't admitted it. But end the version of it that everyone had agreed to perform. The version where Dad was the righteous patriarch, where Garrett was the worthy heir, where Mom was the loyal wife, where I was the mistake. All of it, done, because of a piece of paper in my bag. I called Dana at 11. Am I doing the right thing? She didn't hesitate. Are they doing the right thing to you? Silence. Callie, that man humiliated you in front of your entire family on a holiday. He's trying to legally erase you. Your brother treats you like a footnote. Your mother watched all of it and chose her comfort over your dignity. For 20 years. She took a breath. You didn't start this. You're just the one brave enough to finish it. I hung up. I opened my laptop. The DNA results glowed on the screen. 99.9998%. I closed it. I placed the notarized envelope in my bag, the navy tote I'd bought to match the blazer, and set it by the door. I turned off the light. I didn't sleep. But I was ready. January 18th, 9:47 a.m. Howard Pratt's office was in a red brick professional building on Broad Street. The kind of place that smelled like old carpet and authority. Second floor. Berber carpet, walnut wainscoting, framed diplomas arranged with surgical precision. I arrived 13 minutes early. Deliberate. I wanted to be seated before anyone else walked in. The conference room was long and narrow. A walnut table, 12 leather chairs, a window overlooking the parking lot. Howard Pratt's assistant offered me water. I took it. Set it on a coaster. Set my bag on the floor beside my chair, the envelope inside. They arrived in clusters. Uncle Dennis and Aunt Brenda first, quiet, nodding at me with the careful politeness of people who know something is about to go wrong. Then cousins I hadn't spoken to since last Thanksgiving. Then Garrett and Stacy, Garrett in a sport coat that probably cost more than my rent, Stacy in heels clicking on the hardwood. 15 people total. Not the whole family, but the ones who mattered. The inner circle. Dad came in last. Of course he did. Rick Mitchell didn't enter a room. He occupied it. Charcoal blazer, starched white shirt, the Breitling catching the overhead light. He sat at the head of the table. Garrett slid into the chair at his right. Mom sat to his left, eyes already red-rimmed, fingers working the clasp of her Mikimoto bracelet like a rosary. Dad saw me and paused. Surprised you showed up, he said. I didn't answer. I folded my hands on the table. I was wearing the navy blazer, the tailored trousers, the leather Oxfords. My hair was pulled back. No earrings. No makeup except a clean line of red lipstick, because Dana had told me, half joking, armor comes in all forms. Howard Pratt entered with a leather binder. He sat at the opposite end from Dad, cleared his throat. This is a formality, Callie, Dad said across the table, loud enough for the room. You're here as a courtesy, nothing more. I met his eyes. I said nothing. Howard opened the binder. Howard Pratt was a careful man. Mid-60s, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of lawyer who read every clause aloud because he'd once seen what happened when someone didn't. He opened the binder, adjusted his glasses, and began. This document represents the stated testamentary intentions of Richard Allen Mitchell, prepared in consultation with this office, dated January 3rd of this year. Skip the preamble, Howard, Dad said. Get to it. Howard glanced at him, then nodded. He flipped a page. Article 4, Section 1, Distribution of Assets. All real property, business interests, and financial assets held by Richard Allen Mitchell shall pass exclusively to his biological children, as verified by legally recognized documentation upon the date of his passing. Dad leaned back in his chair and looked at me. Not with anger, with satisfaction, the look of a man who's just nailed the final board on a fence. See? He said. Black and white. Garrett nodded. It's just business, Cal. A few relatives shifted in their seats. Aunt Brenda pressed her lips together. Uncle Dennis studied the grain of the table. Nobody spoke. Howard continued, detailing the breakdown: the Briarwood house, the Mitchell and Sons shares, the investment accounts, the life insurance. $3.2 million in total estimated value. All of it directed to biological children. The phrase repeated like a hammer stroke. Biological children, biological children, biological children. And every time he said it, Dad's chin lifted a fraction higher. When Howard finished, he removed his glasses and folded his hands. This document remains in draft form and requires execution, signatures, and witnesses to become legally binding. However, Mr. Mitchell wished to share his intentions with the family prior to finalization. He looked around the room. Are there any questions or objections? Silence. Dad smiled. The room exhaled. My hand moved to my bag. I have an objection. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Low, clear. The kind of voice I use at 3 a.m., when a ventilator alarm goes off and a room full of panicking parents needs someone to be calm. Every head turned. Dad's smile didn't drop. It froze. Excuse me? Not emotional, I said. Procedural. I stood, walked to the conference room door, opened it. Margaret Foley stepped in. Gray pantsuit, reading glasses on a chain, a leather portfolio under her arm. She'd been waiting in the hallway for 11 minutes. We'd timed it. Who the hell is this? Dad said. My name is Margaret Foley. I'm an estate attorney licensed in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I represent Caroline Mitchell. The room went very still. You hired a lawyer? Dad's voice pitched upward. Not angry yet, but close. The way a thunderstorm sounds before the first crack. For what? There's nothing to contest. You're not... Mr. Mitchell. Margaret's voice cut clean. Your draft will states that assets pass to biological children only. We'd like to submit documentation relevant to that clause. She nodded at me. I reached into my bag. My fingers found the envelope. Smooth, sealed, the notary stamp slightly raised under my thumb. I'd carried it for 3 days. It weighed almost nothing. It weighed everything. I set it on the table, centered, right between the water pitcher and the leather binder. 15 people stared at it. Mom's breathing changed. I could hear it from across the room. Shallow, fast, the way patients breathe when they know bad news is coming before the doctor opens their mouth. I looked at my father. You wanted to know if I was yours, Dad. You asked me at Thanksgiving. In front of the whole family, you gave me a DNA kit. You made it a joke. I pushed the envelope 1 inch toward him. I took the test. Here are the results. Margaret opened the envelope with the practiced calm of someone who'd done this 100 times. She removed 3 stapled pages, scanned the room, and read aloud. Paternity test conducted by Genelink Diagnostics, an AABB-accredited laboratory in Bethesda, Maryland. Test subjects: Richard Allen Mitchell, alleged father; Caroline Rose Mitchell, child. Samples received December 2nd. Analysis completed December 19th. She paused. The room was so quiet I could hear the furnace cycling through the vents. Conclusion: based on analysis of genetic markers, the probability of paternity is 99.9998%. Richard Allen Mitchell is the biological father of Caroline Rose Mitchell. She set the paper down. Dad stared at it like it was written in a language he'd forgotten. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not possible. The lab is federally accredited, Margaret said, evenly. Results are notarized. Chain of custody is documented. I have 2 additional certified copies if you'd like your own attorney to review them. Garrett shot forward in his chair. She faked it. She had to have faked it. There's no way. Mr. Mitchell. Margaret didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. ABB accreditation is the standard used by U.S. courts for paternity determination. These results are as reliable as a test ordered by a judge. Garrett's mouth worked, but nothing came out. Mom hadn't moved. Her hands were flat on the table. Her eyes were fixed on the paper. Her face, I'll never forget this. Her face held the expression of a person watching a building collapse in slow motion, knowing they were inside it. Dad turned to Howard Pratt. Howard, can she do this? Howard removed his glasses. Rick, the results appear legitimate. I didn't ask for a recommendation. Mr. Mitchell. Margaret folded her hands. Before you request a retest, which you're entitled to, you may want to consider testing all of your children. Given what we now know, it seems prudent. The word landed like a grenade with a delayed fuse. All. Dad looked at Garrett, then at Mom, then back at me. And for the first time in 20 years, I watched my father's certainty crack. I didn't say it. I want to be clear about that. I didn't say, Garrett isn't your son. I didn't say, Mom had an affair. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I didn't need to. The math was already doing the work. You could see it moving through the room like a current, face by face, chair by chair. If Callie is Rick's daughter and Rick has believed for 20 years that his wife cheated, then who was the product of the affair? I kept my voice level. I'm your biological child, Dad. The test confirms it. Now, if you'd like to proceed with a will that leaves everything to your biological children, I fully support that. The sentence sat there like a lit match on dry grass. Garrett stood up. What the hell is she implying? I looked at him. I'm not implying anything, Garrett. I'm presenting facts. Dad taught me that's what Mitchells do. His face went red. Not embarrassed red, but furious red. The kind that starts at the collar and climbs. He turned to Mom. Tell her she's wrong. Mom, tell her. Jolene didn't look at him. She was staring at the table, both hands pressed flat like she was trying to hold it together physically, molecularly. Rick. Her voice came out broken. We need to talk privately. Sit down, Jolene. Dad's voice was a blade. He hadn't moved from his chair. But something behind his eyes had shifted, a tectonic slide, slow and irreversible. He was looking at Garrett the way he'd spent 20 years looking at me. Aunt Brenda leaned forward. Rick, what is going on? Uncle Dennis put a hand on the table. Everyone let's take a breath. But nobody took a breath. The room was holding one. Jolene started crying. Not the quiet kind. The kind that sounds like something inside has finally given way. A levee. A wall. A lie held together with 30 years of silence and a Mikimoto bracelet. She was crying because she was scared. And everyone in that room could feel it. Dad turned to her. Slow. The way a man turns when he already knows the answer but needs to hear it out loud. The way you need to hear the doctor say the word even though the scan is right there on the screen. Is there something you need to tell me, Jolene? She shook her head. Then she stopped shaking it. Then she covered her face with both hands, and the Mikimoto bracelet slid down her wrist and clattered against the walnut table. Rick, it was before Callie was born. It was... Who? Greg Nolan. The name landed like a stone in still water. I watched it ripple outward. Aunt Brenda's hand flew to her mouth. Uncle Dennis closed his eyes. 2 cousins exchanged a glance so fast you'd miss it if you blinked. Greg Nolan. The name meant something to the older Mitchells. He'd been a subcontractor for Mitchell & Sons in the early 90s. Framing crew, back when Dad was still building the business out of a pickup truck. He'd been around the family, around the house, around Jolene. It was one time, Mom whispered. One time, Rick. Early 94. You were gone for 3 months on that Chesapeake Bay project, and I was alone. And early 94. Dad's voice was flat, mechanical. He was doing the math. Everyone was doing the math. Garrett was born in October of 1994. The room understood before Garrett did. I could see it in their faces. The slow, awful dawning, the way people look when they realize a story they've believed their whole lives was built on sand. Garrett stared at Mom. What are you saying? Mom? What are you saying? She couldn't look at him. She couldn't look at any of us. Her head dropped, and her shoulders folded inward, and she whispered, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Dad's fist hit the table. Not hard enough to break anything. Hard enough to rattle every glass. Greg Nolan? His voice cracked on the name. The guy who poured my foundations? Nobody answered. Nobody could. Garrett was standing now, both hands on the table, leaning forward like a man bracing against a wave he couldn't see. No. His voice was high, tight, stripped of every ounce of golden boy ease. No, that's a lie. Dad, tell her she's lying. Tell her. Dad didn't tell her anything. He was looking at Garrett. Really looking. Maybe for the first time in 31 years. And I watched something shift behind his eyes. The same narrowing, the same cold appraisal, the same suspicion he'd aimed at me across dining tables and holiday dinners and group chat captions for 2 decades. He was measuring Garrett the way he'd always measured me. I'm your son, Garrett said. I look just like you. Everyone says, Dad, everyone says I look just like you. Dad's voice came out quiet, almost a whisper. You look like Greg. Garrett flinched like he'd been struck. And the room did something I'll never forget. Every set of eyes moved to the framed family portrait hanging on Howard Pratt's wall. Not our portrait, Howard's. But it didn't matter because the Mitchells were all picturing the same image. The Christmas card photo from 2019, the one Mom sent to 150 people. Rick, Jolene, Garrett, all blonde. And me, the auburn-haired girl standing slightly apart, like she'd been photoshopped in from a different family. Except now the picture read differently. Aunt Brenda was the one who said it. Softly, almost to herself. Oh my God, the hair. Callie has Rick's mother's hair. She was right. Grandma Elaine Mitchell, Dad's mother, who passed when I was 3, had auburn hair. Dark red, almost mahogany. I'd seen it in photographs but never made the connection because nobody had ever let me make it. Nobody had ever said, You look like your grandmother, Callie. That line was reserved for Garrett. You look just like your dad. Except he didn't. He never had. The room was unraveling. Garrett shoved his chair back and paced to the window, hands clasped behind his neck, breathing hard. Stacy reached for him. He pulled away. Mom was slumped in her chair, barely conscious. Aunt Brenda had one arm around her, fanning her face with a legal pad. Howard Pratt sat perfectly still, pen frozen above his binder, the face of a man watching his billable hour turn into a bonfire. Dad hadn't moved. He sat at the head of the table with his hands flat on the walnut surface, staring at the DNA report like it was a mirror showing a face he didn't recognize. I stood up. Not fast, not dramatic. The way I stand up in the ICU when I have information a family needs to hear. Steady. Present. Dad. He didn't look up. For 20 years, you called me a mistake. You tore up the Father's Day card I made when I was 8. You didn't come to my graduation. You cut my tuition and let me take on $47,000 in loans. You posted about me in the family group chat like I was a punchline. You handed me a DNA kit at Thanksgiving in front of 25 people and dared me to prove I belonged. I paused. And now that kit, your joke, proves that I was your only biological child this entire time. The daughter you threw away was the one who was real, and the son you gave everything to. I stopped. Because I'm not cruel. Because Garrett was at the window and his shoulders were shaking, and whatever he was, whatever he'd done, he didn't choose this any more than I did. I didn't come here to take anyone's money, I said. I didn't come here for revenge. I came here because you summoned me. You wanted the truth read out loud in front of the family. So here it is. I looked at him, at the Breitling on his wrist, at the hands that built a company and tore up a child's card with equal ease. I don't need your money. I don't need your name. I just needed you to know that your cruelest joke told the truth you were too afraid to find. I sat down. The room was silent except for my mother's quiet sobbing and the sound of the furnace cycling through the vents. Nobody looked at my father. Everybody looked at me. Aunt Brenda moved first. She stood up, slowly, like a woman who'd just made a decision she should have made a long time ago, crossed the room and put her arms around me. Not a polite hug. A real one. The kind that says I see you and I'm sorry without using either phrase. I should have said something years ago, she whispered against my shoulder. I watched him do this to you, and I said nothing. I'm sorry, Callie. Uncle Dennis cleared his throat. He was looking at Dad, and his expression wasn't sympathy. It was something harder than that. Rick, what have you done? Dad didn't answer. Cousin Tara, the one who'd sent the single grimacing emoji in the group chat, stood up and walked to my side of the table. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, next to Brenda, next to me. A quiet vote. Others followed. Not all of them. Some stared at the table. Some studied their phones. But enough of them, 5, then 6, then 8, shifted their weight, their chairs, their attention toward the end of the room where I sat. The end near the door, the end near the kitchen. The seat I'd been assigned my whole life. Howard Pratt closed his binder. He removed his glasses and spoke with the measured gravity of a man choosing his words for a legal record. Mr. Mitchell, I strongly advise you to postpone any further action on this estate plan until the relevant facts can be independently verified. The document as drafted is no longer straightforward. That was Howard's way of saying, you wrote a will to punish your daughter and it just became the instrument of your own undoing. Garrett was already gone. He'd slipped out during Brenda's hug, Stacy's heels clicking behind him down the hallway. I heard the front door of the building open and shut. Mom was being helped to her feet by Brenda and a cousin whose name I should remember but don't. Her mascara had run in 2 dark lines down her cheeks. She looked at me once, just once, as they guided her past my chair. She didn't say anything, but her eyes said everything. I'm sorry. And you were never supposed to find out. Dad sat alone at the head of the table. The Breitling caught the light. The binder sat closed. The DNA report lay in the center of the table, untouched, like a verdict nobody wanted to be the first to pick up. He still hadn't said a word. Margaret laid it out in the hallway afterward, while the family filtered past us toward the parking lot. She kept her voice low, but she didn't sugarcoat it. Here's where things stand. Your father's new will, the one Howard just read, was never signed. It's a draft. Legally, it's toilet paper. She held up a finger. His previous will, filed in 2021, divides his estate equally among my children. No biological qualifier. That will is still operative. So I'm covered either way, I said. Yes. Under the old will, you inherit as his child. If he's stubborn enough to sign the new one, biological children only, you inherit as his only biological child. He built a cage and locked himself inside it. She glanced toward the parking lot where Garrett's Tahoe was pulling out fast, tires barking on cold asphalt. What about Garrett? That depends on your father. Under the new draft, Garrett has no claim. He's not a biological child. Under the old will, he's listed as a child, which is legally sufficient unless someone challenges it. I won't challenge it. She nodded. There's another option. Your father could formally adopt Garrett. Adult adoption is legal in Virginia. Straightforward petition. No age limit. It would restore Garrett's legal standing as Rick's child for inheritance purposes. But it would be public. It would be on record, yes, and Garrett would need to consent. I leaned against the brick wall and watched my breath cloud in the January air. Across the lot, Aunt Brenda was helping Mom into her Lexus. Uncle Dennis stood by his truck, hands in his pockets, staring at the ground. 15 people had walked into that room believing one story. They'd walked out carrying a different one. And the man who'd authored both versions was still sitting inside, alone, at the head of an empty table. "Margaret, thank you." She shook my hand, firm, professional. "You didn't need me, Callie. You just needed the truth to have a witness." I went back inside. The conference room was empty, except for Dad. Howard had left, tactfully, I'm sure, with a brief and billable goodbye. The leather binder was gone. The water pitcher was still there, condensation pooling on the walnut. Dad sat at the head of the table. His hands were in his lap now. The Breitling had slid down his wrist loose, like he'd lost weight in the last 30 minutes. His eyes were red but dry. He wasn't crying. I don't think Rick Mitchell had cried since Reagan was in office. I sat down across from him, not at the far end, not near the kitchen door. I pulled out a chair 2 seats away and I sat, and I waited. It took him almost a full minute. "Did you know?" he finally said. "Before the test. Did you know about Garrett?" "No," I said. "I just didn't run this time." He nodded, slow, like the motion hurt. Another silence. Longer. The furnace kicked on again, and the vents exhaled warm air across the room. "I owe you," he started. "You owe me nothing I want to take." He looked at me then. Really looked. Not the dismissive glance across a dinner table. Not the cold appraisal of a man cataloging evidence. He looked at me the way I imagine he looked at that photograph. The one of me at 5, on his lap, laughing, before he decided I didn't belong. "But you owe me an apology," I said. "In writing, sent to the same people who watched you humiliate me. The group chat, the email list, every person who laughed at that DNA kit joke." He opened his mouth. "I'm not asking you to love me, Dad. I'm asking you to correct the record." He closed his mouth. He stared at the table. I stood up, collected my bag, and walked out of Howard Pratt's office into the January cold. The sky was white. The air tasted like frost. My Civic was the oldest car in the lot. I got in. I turned the key. The engine coughed, then caught. I drove to the hospital. I had a shift in 2 hours. 1 week later, Garrett called. I was in the break room, eating a granola bar between patients, when his name lit up my phone. I almost let it go to voicemail. Garrett had never once called me with good news, but something in me, maybe the same something that made me say, "okay," at the Thanksgiving table, told me to pick up. "I did it," he said. No greeting, no preamble. His voice sounded scraped hollow, like a man who'd been yelling into an empty room. "I took the test. Went to a lab in Henrico. Got the results this morning." I set down the granola bar. 0%, he said. "Richard Mitchell is not my biological father. Probability, 0. I listened to him breathe. In, out. The sound of a man recalibrating 31 years of identity in real time. "Did you know it was me?" he asked. "When you walked in there with that envelope. Did you know?" "No. I only knew it was me." Silence. "I called you Honorary Mitchell your whole life," he said. His voice cracked on the word honorary. "I said it like a joke. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas you were allowed to attend, and I'm the one who—" He didn't finish. "You're still my brother, Garrett. That hasn't changed." "How can you say that? After everything Because it's true. We didn't choose this. Either of us." I heard something on the other end that I'd never heard from Garrett Mitchell in 31 years. He was crying. Not the frustrated, angry kind. The kind that comes when the scaffolding falls and you realize the building you were standing on was never there. And you know what? I want to ask you something. If you were in Garrett's place, if you discovered that every privilege, every advantage, every golden boy moment of your entire life was built on a lie someone else told before you were born, what would you do? I genuinely don't know the answer. I don't hate Garrett. He was a victim too, in his own way. He just never knew it until now. Tell me what you think. Drop it in the comments. I didn't cry. I'd done my crying years ago. Come have dinner sometime, I said. I have one chair, but I'll borrow another. He laughed. Just barely. It was a start. 2 weeks after the reading, Mom showed up at my apartment. I saw her through the peephole, standing in the hallway in her wool coat, no makeup, hair unwashed, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. She stood there for 5 full minutes before she knocked. I know because I watched. I opened the door. She looked at my studio. The 450 square feet, the counter desk, the one chair, the tiny Douglas fir still up because I hadn't had the heart to take it down, and something in her face collapsed. Not because the apartment was small, because it was mine, because I'd built this life with nothing she or Dad had given me, and it was still standing. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She sat on the edge of my bed, the only other place to sit, and pressed her palms together between her knees. She didn't look at me. She looked at the floor. I knew Garrett wasn't Rick's from the day he was born, she said. The timing. I knew, and I was terrified. So I said nothing. And when your father started to suspect, when he looked at you, with your red hair, and decided you were the proof of what I'd done, I let him. I let him blame you. Because as long as he was suspicious of you, he wasn't suspicious of Garrett. And as long as he wasn't suspicious of Garrett, he wouldn't divorce me. She swallowed. I used you as a shield, Caroline. For 20 years, I let my daughter take the punishment for my lie. The words hung in the air of my tiny apartment. Yes, I said. You did. She flinched. I can't forgive you today. Maybe not ever. But I don't want to carry your secret anymore, Mom. And I won't carry your guilt either. That's yours. She nodded. She stood up. She walked to the door. I noticed her wrists. Bare. No Mikimoto bracelet. She left without asking for a hug. I closed the door behind her, leaned against it, and stood there until my breathing was even again. Then I made myself dinner. Alone. In my apartment. On my own terms. February 14th. Valentine's Day, of all things. The universe has a strange sense of timing. I was eating lunch in the hospital cafeteria. Chicken sandwich, orange juice, fluorescent lights, the usual. When my phone buzzed. Email notification. From Richard A. Mitchell. Subject. To my family. Recipients. The Mitchell family distribution list. All 42 members. The same list he'd used to share the DNA kit photo. The same list he'd used to announce the will. I opened it. To my family, I have spent 20 years treating my daughter Caroline as though she did not belong. I called her a mistake. I denied her opportunities I freely gave to others. I humiliated her publicly on multiple occasions, most recently at Thanksgiving, in front of people she had every right to feel safe around. I was wrong. Caroline is my biological daughter. She has always been my biological daughter. The doubt I held was unfounded, and the damage I caused because of it is something I will have to live with for the rest of my life. She did not ask for money. She did not ask for the business. She asked for one thing, a public correction. This is that correction. Caroline, you were never a mistake. I was. Richard A. Mitchell. I read it twice. The cafeteria noise, trays clattering, someone's phone ringing, 2 nurses arguing about a shift swap, continued around me like nothing had happened. Dana slid into the seat across from me. She'd seen my face. What is it? I turned the phone toward her. She read it. She looked at me. You okay? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Not the reflexive, I'm fine you give when someone asks during a hard week, but an honest inventory. 20 years of subtraction. 1 Thanksgiving, 1 envelope, 1 piece of paper that said what my father couldn't. I'm free, I said. Dana nodded. She didn't push. She just sat there with me, eating her own terrible cafeteria sandwich under the same fluorescent lights, in the same break that would end in 12 minutes. It was the most ordinary moment of my life, and it was enough. Margaret called in early March. Your father wants to revise the will. New language. Assets split equally between you and Garrett. He's filing a petition for adult adoption. Garrett agreed to it. Virginia courts process these in a few weeks. It'll restore Garrett's legal standing as Rick's child for all purposes. Good, I said. There's also the question of your share. Roughly $800,000 to $1.6 million, depending on valuations. Your father wants you to have it. I was standing at my kitchen counter, the same counter where I'd eaten Christmas dinner alone, where I'd opened the DNA kit, where I'd drafted an email that changed my family, the counter that doubled as my desk, my dining table, my life. I want it converted into an endowed scholarship fund, I said, for nursing students from low-income families. Accredited BSN programs, renewable for 4 years, no strings. Name it the Mitchell Nursing Scholarship. Silence on the line. You're sure? Margaret said. I didn't fight for the inheritance. I fought for the truth. The truth was always enough. She paused. I'll draft the paperwork. I signed the documents on a Tuesday evening at my kitchen counter. The same pen I use for patient charts. The same table. The same 450 square feet. Somewhere out there, a 20-year-old nursing student who grew up being told she wasn't enough, who worked doubles and borrowed money and kept showing up anyway, would get a letter one day telling her that someone believed in her future, that someone had once been in her exact position and made it through. She wouldn't know my name. That was fine. I didn't need anyone to know my name. I just needed someone to get the chance I almost didn't. April. The first warm Saturday in months. The kind of Virginia evening where the dogwoods are blooming and the air smells like cut grass and the light stays golden until almost 8. I hosted dinner. My studio apartment. My rules. 6 people around a second-hand pine table from IKEA, the one I'd bought to replace the counter eating. No chairs had initials carved into them. No assigned seats. No hierarchy. Dana sat to my left, already arguing with my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, 72, widowed, the woman who'd left soup outside my door every Tuesday since I moved in, about whether cornbread should have sugar in it. 2 nurses from the ICU, Marcus and Lee, were debating something about ventilator protocols with the same passion other people reserve for football. Margaret Foley had sent a bottle of wine with a note, for the table, MF. And at the end, in a borrowed folding chair, was Garrett. He'd called the week before. Not his usual breezy tone, quiet, careful, the voice of a man still learning who he was. Can I come? I don't really know where else to go. Bring dessert, I said, and don't bring that Tahoe. Parking's tight. He showed up with a store-bought pie and a Honda Civic he'd bought 2 weeks ago. I didn't ask what happened to the Tahoe. I didn't need to. I sat at the head of the table. Not because I was important, because it was closest to the stove, and the pasta needed stirring. Dad wasn't there. We weren't there yet. Maybe we'd never be. But on my refrigerator, held up with a magnet from the hospital gift shop, was a piece of construction paper. Faded, torn down the middle, taped back together with care. To the best dad in the world. I'd kept it. All these years, I'd kept it. Not for him. For the 8-year-old girl who made it. She deserved to know it survived. I looked around my table. Dana laughing. Garrett listening. Mrs. Patterson winning the cornbread argument. The evening light coming through the window. Warm and gold and ordinary. Family isn't blood. Family isn't a name on a will. Family is who stays when the truth comes out. And for the first time in my life, every person at my table had chosen to be there. That was enough. That was everything. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever been the one overlooked, underestimated, or erased by the people who were supposed to love you first, I want you to know, your worth was never theirs to decide. If you connected with this, please hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. There's another story waiting for you. Check the link in the description. It might be exactly what you need today. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and take care of each other.